So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Stock up and save big on shoes, tops, dresses, accessories, and more must-haves for summer. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
This episode is brought to you by Google Chrome. You think you know a browser, but Gemini and Chrome? That's new. It can help you with practically anything on the web, like restoring a vintage motorcycle from a 50-page restoration blog, or finally break down that long article you've had open for weeks. Gemini and Chrome is here for it. Ready to make anything online make sense? There's no place like Chrome. Check responses, setup required, compatibility and availability varies, 18+.
This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
Hello and welcome to How We're the Podcast. It's Martin here, and we've got another episode of ROKER Rewind for you today. Now, if you tuned into last week's episode, we talked all about Marco Gabbiadini and Eric Gates and how their partnership came into being. That was part one that covered the Division 3 season, and now we're going to look at what transpired over the following 2 seasons with Eric Gates and Marco Gabbiadini ploughing their trade in Division 2, looking to get Sunderland back up to the top flight. Now, Andrew, we left last week, and Eric Gates has played a leading role in this Division 3 title. As Kelvin, I think, said at the end of last week's episode, we were looking at Eric Gates and Marco Gabbiadini thinking, these two are 2 players we can hang our hats on in the second division. They'll step up, no bother at all. That was the feeling. That was the general feeling around the club. And, that was a feeling of everybody in football who'd seen them play in the third division because they offered so much. Gates has got so much experience. Gabbiadini's got so much potential. The fly in the ointment, to some extent, is Eric Gates is out of contract, and Denis Smith has made no secret, I guess, of the fact that he wants to sign another striker. He's gone in for John Byrne in the lead into the championship. He's tried to get Rossini out of Fulham. 2 very different types of players, but both players who would play a leading role alongside Gabbiadini, you would think. So this pre-season, Denis Smith's trying to prepare the team to get equipped for the second division. Obviously, we don't want to be caught in the relegation battle again. But when you read through the press cuttings at the time, there's a few strikers being linked. But also Eric Gates is umming and ahhing about signing a new contract, and he actually turns down the contract offer. So Denis Smith's kind of left with no option, is he, but to look elsewhere and see what else is around there?
No, his hand is forced. There's a lot of factors going into this season. There's a lot of issues. It is a big season for the club, back at a level that previously we had absolutely stank out. So there was a lot of pressure on Sunderland to compete in the second tier at the very least. The contract situation has always been bubbling away in the background with Eric Gates. You see it now, it's managed a lot better in general, and a player going into maybe the last 2 years of a contract, there's talk that a club will want to sell them, and that's the best time to sell them and to maximize their price tag, as it were. We've tried to sell Gates on several occasions, and just there's nobody biting. He's been on this transfer list. His name was regularly being touted around, and just nobody was having him for a particular reason. His case has now been strengthened, though, by the fact that he's had a good season. perhaps Gates now realises, oh, there is a bit of value, there is a bit of buzz to me, so I'm now in a better bargaining position. The link with John Byrne in particular interested me. Like you said, there was links with various strikers, various types of strikers, but the one with John Byrne is intriguing because in my mind, they were very similar players in so many aspects, even in just the way they looked. You know, when Kelvin was talking about how Gates could sometimes look a little bit laconic even, and as if he didn't want to be there. John Byrne, in my mind, I think to me, they both played with like an untucked shirt and with their socks rolled down, and they kind of just ambled along, and then bang, they would do something. So I can see why John Byrne was maybe identified as a replacement. It's hard though. It's hard to find a like for Eric Gates. Again, when Kelvin was talking about him earlier, he wasn't a classic centre forward. He wasn't a classic striker. He'd be described now as, I don't know,
a number 10.
Yeah, a number 10 or a false something or whatever. I don't know how many players were around at that time. I don't know as well if that was necessarily the tactic that Denis Smith wanted from his team. We'll come to it in future weeks and some of the players he's linked with. It's almost as if it's been forced upon him, this type of partnership. And it's not necessarily what Denis Smith himself wanted. Am I right in saying that he maybe preferred, rather than Gates being the little man and Gabbiadini being the big man, it was almost as if he wanted a bigger man, and Gabbiadini was almost the foil, as it were.
And when you look at Gabbiadini and the style of play, you can understand that, can't you? You can understand why you might want somebody for Gabbiadini to play off, but he played off Gates, but was just in a different sort of way. Gates was a target in terms of a focal point for the team to play off and play around, but wasn't a physical target. It wasn't an aerial target. It was very much ball on the deck sort of target. And Kelvin, you said at the end of last week's episode that we were looking into the second division season. We were pretty confident that Gates and Gabbiadini would be two players who would make that step up and be able to perform well at that level. Obviously, Gates out of contracts with Smith's looking around. And the sorts of players he's looking around at during this summer to replace Eric Gates aren't, as Andrew said, it's kind of difficult to find a like-for-like replacement with Gates, but he's linked with Paul Rideout, who was a former Aston Villa striker who was playing in Italy. He's a 6-foot centre-forward, more of a target man than Gates would be. So he's kind of looking at different sorts of players.
I mean, first of all, I don't think there were too many players like Eric Gates. When you look at his build and the way he played his football, I don't think there were that many players out there like him, number one. And number two, the players he was looking at, you mentioned Paul Rideout. He was a big unit. He was a lad that could look after himself on the pitch. He could score goals. He was a good. Remember him as being a highly regarded young England player, wasn't he? I remember him getting lots of plaudits. I think we maybe had a look at him once or twice before as well, is my memory. So the players Smithy was looking at, because I get what Andrew was saying about Johnny Byrne. He did look like a big forward, a big bustling forward, because he wasn't a slim boy Byrne. He packed a bit of meat, but he had a lovely touch on him, and I guess he looked like he was the kind of forward who. He wasn't the kind of forward that he looked like, is what I'm trying to say. When I first saw him, I thought, we've got a big bustling forward here. But he wasn't anything like that. No. He was a touch player. And you see, you guys saw John Byrne play, didn't you?
Yeah.
How quick was John Byrne?
How quick?
Was he a quick player?
No. He was quick. He's quick in the head. He wasn't. He wasn't
Yeah.
quick.
He was
He wasn't quick over
sharp.
a few yards, was he?
He was sharp, and his positional play was good, and his ability to get the ball under control and get it played off was quite good. Well, that's where he was similar to Gatesy.
Yeah.
I don't think he didn't have the knack of drawing free kicks the way that Gatesy did. We lost something there when Byrne came in and did start playing for us. I always thought he could be doing with learning how to hit the deck a bit quicker when he's hoofed up a height. But of course, when people were hoofing Byrne when he played for us, it was a bit different hoofing Byrne to giving Eric Gates a hoof. You know, if you kicked him, the height and the weight of him, he's obviously is going to go up in the air. You know, so I really. Honestly, I remember going into that second division season thinking our front two will work even better in the second division with with the uptick, the different level of football will do even better. And what I thought Gates brought to us was he got to keep the ball down on the deck and play football. And I think that suited Gabbiadini as well, you know. So all these players he was looking at, ride out. I'm trying to think of that. I've lost the other big lad that got a mention at the time. It'll come to me. There was another lad that we were meant to be sniffing around after at that point, you know. These bigger players, bigger build players, you know, more target centre forwards. He obviously did, Smithy, have this view that Gabbiadini could play off one of them, but it was different in style to what he'd been doing with Gates and Gabbiadini. You know, it was a conundrum, that one, when he was these players that he was chasing. I wondered whether what he wanted was the option. He wanted to have his options open, you know, and to be able to play Gates and Gabbiadini and to play, and then when needed, to be able to play a big lad up there. And probably Gabbers would be the common denominator. He would play, and then he might rotate around Gates. He won't, one game depending on who we're playing against, and a big unit like Paul Rideout the next week. It was a really head scratching time, that, in terms of watching that from the touchlines, I think.
And Andrew, during the course of this pre-season, Denis Smith's plans are being completely disrupted by Eric Gates because he hasn't signed a new contract. There's a report in June that Gates has told Denis Smith he's turning down the new contract. He's not going to sign what's been offered. And Denis Smith's telling the press, there are a few players I'm interested in, but I need to know what Eric Gates is doing, because that would give me a few more options. By which he means if Gates is going, I'm going to need to bring in another striker. If he's staying, I might not. So all that he's told me he's turning down the offer. He has not informed me of any other club's interests. We have made a good offer to all the players out of contracts, up to them whether they sign, but we will not be blackmailed, which I thought was an interesting. Again, Denis Smith with his press officer stood next to him. A couple of weeks later, still no agreement. He's turned down another contract, with Denis Smith saying, I'm confident Eric Gates will be playing for Sunderland next season. He wants to stay. It's just a matter of sorting a few things out. He has managed to get a couple of players out. John Moore has gone to Hull for 25 grand. Paul Atkinson's got to Port Vale for 20 grand. Keith Burchan's on the verge of going to Walsall for a little bit of money as well. Now, in August, August the 10th, the newspaper reports say Gates is expected to end months of uncertainty by signing a new 2-year contract this week. And Denis Smith said, I'm not prepared to discuss what offers are being made to Eric Gates, but he has had 2 offers from day one. He now has 3 offers on the table. And whether that's for a 1-year, 2-year, and 3-year contract, or whether that's from different clubs, it's not specified. But he said Gates must now decide what package is acceptable to him. So he's got offers on the table. This is the 10th of August that Gates is rumoured to be signing a new contract. It's all done and dusted, apparently. The new season kicks off on the 27th, by the way, so it's 2 weeks out from the new season starting. So in terms of pre-season preparation, getting your players in, all that sort of stuff, it's getting a little bit down to the line. When you go through it all, Sunderland have a slow start to the season, really. We draw 1-1 our opening game against Bournemouth. We get beat 2-0 at Eric Gates' former club, Ipswich, and we draw 0-0 at home to Bradford. Neither Gates nor Gabbiadini have been on the score sheet so far. Both of them have played in all 3 games. After that game, it's actually the 13th of September when the newspaper reports say Gates has signed his new contract at last, a new 2-year contract. Denis Smith says he's very happy that we've finally got this sorted out. Now, whether there was any assurances about playing time or what Gates' role would be or what have you, who knows? He signs on the 13th of September. On the 19th of September, a new striker arrives in the building. Denis Smith brings a new striker in. Now, you wonder whether he delayed that until the contract had been signed, because if there was more competition up front, maybe Gates is less inclined to sign new contracts. Who knows? But Andrew, Billy Whitehurst arrives in the building.
There's games within games there. Denis Smith is a wily old character. Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if the Whitehurst deal was just kept on the back burner until Gates was over the line. I mean, can you imagine the teeth gnashing and all of that would happen nowadays if we had a player who was out of contract, hadn't signed a new deal, was perhaps on one of these week-to-week contracts, but was still playing? I don't think you'd be able to handle a situation in that way these days. And also, this isn't a criticism. This is a shame. This is a real shame. We don't have footballers going by the names of Billy or Eric or Keith or Dale anymore. You know, when you said Dale Banton was somebody that Smith had a little look at, there's no professional footballers called Dale Banton anymore, and that's the game's poorer for it. I think Gates probably did always want to sign. This is understandable. He wants to protect himself and get the best deal he can from Sunderland. But we spoke earlier about how he seemed to be a good fit back in the region that he's from. There's probably not a lot of alternatives. I think he's just perhaps at that point going, all right, okay. So when I was in contract, you wanted rid of me. Now that I'm out of contract, you're desperate for me. I'll just string this along, see what I can get out of this, see just how keen Sunderland are to keep me at ROKER Park.
No, that's right. So Whitehurst comes in that Bradford City game that ended 0-0, which I mentioned earlier. Gabbiadini went off at half-time injured, which might be another factor in Denis Smith wanting to get another striker in because Marco was going to be missing for a few weeks. Whitehurst and Gates play together up front away at Birmingham. We get beat 3-2 down St Andrews. They both play against Crystal Palace at home. We draw 1-1. Both play together away at Shrewsbury and we draw 0-0. And the first time, Kelvin, that Whitehurst and Gabbiadini appeared together is in the home game against Oldham Athletic, which was an eventful game, I think, wasn't it?
Well, I well remember this game. Oldham were pretty, Joe Royal was managing them, and they had some handy players in that team. Now, you'll remember that Joe Royal is a centre forward. He was no shrinking violet when he played. He was a charging, rumbustious centre forward with no small amount of skill. And he had, if you look at his managerial career, he did all right, Joe Royal, as a manager. So he comes with Oldham. And my memory of this at the time was that Oldham were, they were one of the more stylish teams, I guess, in one of the littler clubs, but more stylish teams. And had some good players playing for them. But I honestly, that night, bloody hell, we were charging around and we had players looking for contact all night. Now, I honestly, looking back on it, I felt that Billy Whitehurst's influence was already coming to bear on the team. We had a couple of players that were lucky to still be on the pitch at the end of the night. I felt that at the end of that game, I really did feel we were like, we weren't kicking everything that moved, but we weren't a hell of a far away from doing that. I hadn't seen my team play like that for a long, long time, if at all. I couldn't remember watching my team play like that. It was a blood and thunder performance from us. And for me, there were players in there who didn't normally play like that were given it out. And it was like it was done to order. But I do wonder, was it Whitehurst's influence? Because he was, as my brother used to say, Whitehurst had a good first touch and it was usually a foul. He was just such a player for physical contact, and he had a thunderous reputation in football generally for physical contact. His game was built on that physical contact, intimidation. You could see his mouth going all the time on the pitch, and he wasn't saying, "Are you all right? Are you enjoying the game?" That wasn't the crack that he was having with his markers. He was a thunderous, almost old school style centre forward who influenced the way that the team played that night. You can tell that I didn't, although it was a win, it didn't actually suit my hump to see my team playing like that. I didn't come away from that game particularly happy, Thought, I'm not watching that all season, I tell you. That was my feeling.
No,
but anyway.
It's interesting. It's interesting because you look at the nice football and the attacking football that we see in the third division, and as you said in last week's show, the sort of football Denis Smith was known or tried to get his teams to play.
Mm-hmm.
There has been talk in the press, given our sort of slow start to the season. We've played 6 games so far, haven't picked up a win. There's talk about us needing to be a bit more physical, and in the press before this game, it's saying a fully fit Gabbiadini is a handful for any defence, and with Whitehurst alongside him to rough it up in the box, Sunderland might finally get a few of the half chances that so far eluded them this campaign. For that Oldham game, Denis Smith drops John Kay. He's played 52 consecutive games. He drops John Kay from the lineup, drops Eric Gates. Whitehurst comes in, and he changes the formation as well, which I think is quite curious, given the sort of formation that we've played all the way through Denis Smith's reign at Sunderland, which has been a 4-4-2 with Gates and Gabbiadini up front as a partnership.
Mm.
He's brought Billy Whitehurst in, which you think, well, he naturally fits into a 4-4-2, 2 wingers getting crosses in, balls getting played diagonally to him, he can hold it up, win the headers, flick on Gabbiadini. But he brings Frank Gray in and plays him as a sweeper behind 3 defenders. And I remember Frank Gray playing there, and he was 2 yards behind the defensive line. He was genuinely sweeping behind them. And you don't get that sort of role too often these days, where that defender is literally sweeping up behind. But Frank Gray was doing that. And Colin Pascoe was playing behind Gabbiadini and Whitehurst rather than out in the wing. And you kind of think that would have been a perfect position for Eric Gates to play if he wanted to freshen it up a little bit, or to get a little bit more in there. But he puts Pascoe up there. And it's interesting, the day before the Oldham game, Denis Smith says, it'll be interesting to see how Gabbiadini and Colin Pascoe get on without Gates. We had a practice match yesterday, and they did not play well without him. So I'm not sure what he's seen in training to think this is going to be a good idea. But, we win 3-2 against Oldham. The midweek, Kelvin, we play Leeds at home. Billy Whitehurst scores a goal. As I remember it was a flying diving header. He came in horizontally from the halfway line to power through people and score at the full well end. It was probably a little closer in truth. But, Whitehurst gets on the score sheet there. And, it's kind of looking as if we
And
might be all right with that.
and Gabbiadini. What didn't he? Didn't Marco score that
Yeah,
night
Marco
as
scored as
well?
well, yeah.
Yeah. We played well, and we're playing Leeds. One of the big hitters down there in the second division. We played really well, and it was it, it was a bloody good game to watch, that one, and you could see. I'll say to you, having not particularly enjoyed every aspect of the Oldham game, we got a win. I was cheering that, but I'm thinking I'm not turning up to watch this every week. I could see what Smithy was looking for, and you got a little indicator that maybe Whitehurst and Gabbiadini could play together. Just a word about Colin Pascoe. He was a conundrum, Pascoe, because he wasn't an out and out winger. He never was. He was always coming in. He was
No.
always narrowing the play. He wasn't a boy that would go outside his fullback, hit the touchline and cross the ball, but he was a player. I always loved Colin Pascoe and me. I thought he was a cracking signing for us. And I could see why Smithy kept, because he didn't just play him behind the front two. He later on, he tried him up front, as part of the combination. So I could see why he was doing that as well. He was a factor in the G-Force Pascoe for me. He was he was part of the skill factor in there. But Whitehurst, that game against Leeds, he served up and a bit of notice that there was maybe more to him than just violent assault on the pitch, He served up a bit of notice. My thing about, I used to say, our young'un used to say his first touch was always a foul. And I used to say, I really like his fourth touch, it's quite good. But we were maybe being a bit harsh on him. If you look at that Leeds game, the potential was there for Whitehurst and Gabbiadini maybe to be able to play together for sure.
If you're listening, Billy, I thought you were brilliant. Kelvin lives in Shotley Bridge, so reading some of the comments after the Leeds game, they do reflect, Kelvin, what you were saying. Marco's comments are brilliant. He says, "This is after we beat Leeds 2-1. Second home win of the season, second win in 8 games." Marco says, "The system isn't perfect and not pretty to watch. In fact, I think we played better football earlier in the season before Billy came in." I'm quite good in the air anyway, but now that Billy's in the side, it has helped me quite a lot. Previously, the best header in the opposition marked me, but now they look after Billy, and that takes some of the weight off me. Denis Smith says, "Billy Whitehurst summed up our determination with a tremendous performance. I was pleased to see the big fella get off the mark. There is plenty of effort going in at the moment, and though I am delighted with the results, I will be looking to refine our style. Bits and pieces need cleaning up. We're still working a system within a system as we adjust to the second division. Had we got the results early on, our player deserved, there would have been no need for the changes, but such are the demands of our supporters. It had to be done to get people off our backs." Which, again, Denis Smith's not backward and coming forward, is he? And he's quite happy, Andrew, to chuck a couple in, isn't he?
I mean, we're joking about, he obviously didn't have a press officer. Can you imagine if he did have a press officer? He'd be burning through more press officers than he would striking options. We think he can't find a striking lineup that he's happy with. Can you imagine how many people he hires and fires as his press officer if he was going on like this?
There's no comparison with him and Lebris, is there?
No.
You would never die wondering with Smithy. Talking about, if it was in his heat, it was out there.
Talking about comparisons, though, as you were talking about Billy Whitehurst, I did wonder, did Smith see a bit of himself in Whitehurst? I know Smith was a defender,
yeah,
but he was physical. He was more than happy to have a battle. And perhaps Sunderland in a new division, having to set the stall out, I could understand why a player, somebody who played like Smith, I could understand why then he becomes a manager. He feels he needs a bit of that in his team.
But my opinion, and it is an opinion, everybody's, there'll be people that watched Whitehurst play that would think he was, the best thing since sliced bread. And I'll give ground to that as their experience of it. I don't think Denis Smith, first of all, he was a nuggety hard centre half who went about his business in often quite a subtle sort of way. He wasn't a
Right.
red card walking.
Right.
Billy Whitehurst, for me, for me, he was just I did think he was a yellow or a red card just walking out onto the pitch. He looked like, that would happen with him walking. I was very surprised when Smith bought him because his reputation came before him. It wasn't a secret what Billy Whitehurst was about, and I was surprised when Smithy bought him because it's interesting what you say about Smith, and I think it does pertain to the G-Force. Given that he was a hard, nuggety centre half as a player who took no prisoners, don't get us wrong there. You're right about, he liked a bit of steel. He would be a boy to have in your trench and a boy to go to war with, Denis Smith. But as a manager, he got his teams playing. He seemed to like his teams to play this lovely, fast breaking football, passing football seemed to be his thing. It always amazed me that about him because I did expect him when he came in to be all about defence, almost a Mick Buxton kind of character. Let's stop the teams from scoring and see what happens after that. He had this lovely way of trying to get his teams play, and I was surprised. I was surprised at the time. And nothing happened since after that that changed my mind that I just don't know what he was thinking of. But obviously, I tell you what he was thinking of. He wanted a big, bustling target man.
Yeah.
To play with Gabbiadini.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
And I think that's correct. Whether it was an option or whether it was a first choice plan, I think having that option for certain games from the bench was probably what Denis Smith was thinking in terms of attacking this Division 2 season. The other aspect to it, which, Kelvin, you mentioned Billy Whitehurst's reputation, and it was no secret at all. Billy Whitehurst, while at Newcastle, injured Paul Bracewell in the game at St James's Park and ruled Bracewell out for pretty much 2 years. In this summer, the story goes that Reading were up in the northeast on a training camp at Maiden Castle, and Sunderland were also training there at the time. And Billy Whitehurst had come in, got his shirt off, he's covered in bruises and all that sort of stuff. And Denis Smith said, what's been going on with you, Billy? He said, I got into a bit of trouble last night. He'd been out in Sunderland got in all sorts of trouble with some bouncers. And there's another bit to this, which I'll come on to in a second. But Denis Smith saw that Billy Whitehurst was going to be in trouble with Reading and kind of earmarked him for a move based on that because he knew that Billy Whitehurst would be likely to be out in his ear. At the time Sunderland signed him, Whitehurst was on the front pages of the Echo as well as the back. He was in court and he was being charged with this assault during pre-season in Sunderland, all of this other stuff, which I won't go into in too much depth, but it's all there if people want to dig it out. And also he was very good drinking buddies with Ian Botham.
Yeah.
And this was all this was all part of this scene which kind of makes the signing of him even less appealing to some extent. But Denis Smith does it. And on the pitch, from a results point of view, which will have been Denis Smith's primary concern here, Whitehurst and Gabbiadini get put up front for the first time together against Oldham at home. We win that one 3-2. We beat Leeds 2-1 at home. We get beat down at Walsall, but then we draw away at Hull City. We beat Swindon 4-0 at home. We beat Blackburn 2-0 at home. We draw 1-1 away at Man City. We beat Oxford 4-2 away from home. Draw games against Stoke and Chelsea and West Brom. And at that point, you kind of go, maybe he's onto something here. We're grinding out results. We're getting points on the board. We're not looking as if we're going to be in relegation trouble, which would have been the fear at the start of the season. And we're sitting pretty comfortably in the table.
If your business runs on 5 different apps, 12 browser tabs, and one spreadsheet that everyone's afraid to touch, it's probably time for Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that connects every part of your business into one powerful, easy-to-use platform. So instead of wasting time switching between disconnected systems, your entire business works together in real time. Your team moves faster, your data stays accurate, and you can actually focus on growing your business. Let one unified system run your entire business. From the first opportunity to the final payment, everything works together in one place. Whether you're a small business or managing a large operation, Odoo gives you one flexible platform built to grow with you. Learn more at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com.
Study
and play come together on a Windows 11 PC.
And for a limited time, college students get
The best
of both worlds.
Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
But then we go on we get a couple of bad results, but in this spell of form, and Kelvin, I know you've given your memories of Whitehurst and his performance at the time. I must admit, as a young lad watching him, I really liked him because he was going hell for leather, and it was fun to watch.
He was.
when you're looking through the newspapers at the letters pages again in the Echo, supporters are praising Billy Whitehurst for what he's brought to the team. They're commending him, saying he's a far better footballer than I initially thought he was, all this sort of stuff. So there's quite a lot of praise going on for Whitehurst around the time. As I say, form dips off slightly. We get beat 3-0 away at Brighton, 3-1 away at Leicester. And, we talked in part 1 about the sort of parallel story with goalkeepers. Now, Peter Fox, who was a Stoke City goalkeeper, had been linked with Sunderland all the way through this season so far. It was talked about so much, it was almost expected he would be in goal when you turned up to Roker Park one Saturday because it just looked on the verge of happening. And it was very clear Denis Smith wanted a goalkeeper because even though Hesford had done well in the third division season, he dropped a couple of clangers so far in this season. And after the Leicester game, Smith drops Whitehurst and Hesford. He puts Tim Carter in goal, brings Eric Gates back up front, goes back to the 4-4-2 that's worked so well for him in Division 3. And we beat Plymouth 4-1 away from home. And that kind of makes Denis Smith kind of go, maybe that's what we need. Maybe I need to focus on the goalkeeper rather than worry too much about Billy Whitehurst and what's going on up front. And Andrew, that was a big turning point, wasn't it? Because by the end of December, Denis Smith's landed as new goalkeeper and Billy Whitehurst's kind of been sacrificed to enable that signing.
He was, yes. And I don't know if that would have been his first choice. I think it was a case of Hull wanted Billy Whitehurst back, and it was a case of, well, if you want Norman, you're going to have to come up with the goods and give us Whitehurst. In an ideal world, Denis Smith might have hung on to him. That said, all of these stories about Whitehurst, issues with the bouncers, winding people up off the pitch and that, I'm led to believe that Whitehurst, it wasn't his only run-in with the local door staff. So at that time, wasn't Ian Botham at the club training, causing all sorts of hell as well? So whilst he might have had it in his mind that he wanted Whitehurst, it was a case of, well, all right, if we let him go, it brings in Tony Norman, and it takes away some of these 9 a.m. phone calls I'm getting from the local constabulary about What's happened this time? Which pub is it this time? All right, it was 5 bouncers he laid out instead of 4. Right. I'll see what I can do. So yeah, it worked for all parties, and Tony Norman was an amazing signing. He was an amazing part of the jigsaw that we know Smith had been desperate for. We said before, goalkeeping was a perennial problem for Sunderland. So Smith might have seen it as having to take 1 step back to take 2 steps forward. It worked out all right in the end. And also, if you get chance anybody, that Plymouth game you mentioned, Martin, there's some cracking highlights of that game on YouTube. So that's well worth digging out.
Yeah, no, that's right. And Denis Smith says, Hull fancies Billy Whitehurst, and though he has done a good job for us, in the end I had to do what I thought was best for the club. This leaves me a bit thin in the ground for strikers. It was more important that I do the deal. I'm still looking to bring players in, but it is not desperate. So we go on a bit of a run now. Eric Gates is back in the team, and Gates actually opens the scoring in Tony Norman's debut. It's a 4-0 home win over Portsmouth on New Year's Eve. But then we struggle a little bit for goals. We get beat 1-0 away at Bradford. We beat Oxford 1-0, beat Bournemouth 1-0, get beat 2-0 at Leeds, 3-0 at home against Walsall in a game which Keith Burchin plays. I think he went off injured pretty early on in that game. We get beat 4-1 away at Swindon Town. Now, our next game is at home to Hull City, who now have Billy Whitehurst and Ian Hestford in their ranks. And we also have a new striker on the bench. Now, this period of time in between Whitehurst leaving the club and coming back with Hull City, Denis Smith's been desperate to get a striker in. He actually had a deal agreed with Coventry for Cyril Regis. And the fee had been agreed and all that sort of stuff. And Regis had just been appointed as player coach at Coventry, but he wanted to focus more on playing. Denis Smith put a decent bid in for him. It got accepted. And then just as it was about to go through, apparently Coventry reporters who have moved the goalposts and said, actually, we don't want the money, we want Gordon Armstrong. And Denis Smith didn't want to lose Gordon Armstrong. There were a couple of other strikers linked as well, but Thomas Hauser, Kelvin, your another one of your favourites, Thomas Hauser came in, and he ended up making his debut against Hull. And it's a pretty eventful game, as you might imagine, with Billy Whitehurst coming back to ROKER Park a few months after he's left.
It was, to be fair to Hestford and Whitehurst, they both put a typical shift in, and it was a cracking battle with John McPhail and Whitehurst. Just, I think when they were coming out of the tunnel to start the game, you could see them, because McPhail was no shrinking violet. He was like, he had a mouth on him as well. So as well as being a bloody good player, you could see them at each other, and they just fought. I mean, there's entertainment in that, in a way. If you like your football raw-boned and rough, that's what you got at that whole game. But Hestford actually played really well that night. We didn't day. We didn't play too badly that day. It was a bloody good second division game, And Whitehurst put himself about, and he played really well for, I think, 82 minutes of the game. He missed the last 8 minutes because he got sent off for a high tackle on McPhail. And, it was, that's just my view of Whitehurst was he was a red card walking, and he could start an argument in an empty house. He affected other players round about him, sometimes in a, in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. Just going, your point, Martin, about those games where we didn't score a lot of goals. My memory of that is that Gabbiadini was missing. Am I right? I'm asking a question there, really, of you. I haven't got that in front of me. Was he missing for some of those games?
I think. Yeah. So I think he has a spell out of the side in this next run after the whole game. But no, he did miss.
Right.
Sorry, no, he did miss a couple of those games, actually, Kelvin. You're right. He missed the Walsall game at home. And
Yeah.
the Swindon game away was a game that Peter Barnes played his only game for Sunderland, the former England winger.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, yes, you're right. Marco was missing through injury for a few of those games. But then one of the reasons for that was Marco got sent off away at Oxford in the FA Cup.
He did. He did.
For violent conduct. Now, it always just, it's a little fun anecdote. It was funnier a few years ago, but the chap who he punched against Oxford, do either of you know who it was?
No, but I do like this idea that Gabbiadini needed protection because he didn't mind throwing a few daftins himself.
No, he didn't.
It wasn't Andy Melville, was it?
Unfortunately, it wasn't. It was Richard Hill who turned up at Sunderland a little bit later on as director of football and didn't do a particularly good job.
Right.
So he was a midfield player for Oxford, and he was on the receiving end of a Marco right hook back in 1989. So Marco was suspended for a few games, which are those games, Kelvin, that you were referring to there. Marco comes back, and him and Gates Gates doesn't score. Marco gets a few. Gates is then dropped for Thomas Hauser. Hauser is up front with Marco for a home game against Ipswich, in which Marco scores a hat-trick, but once again gets sent off for punching somebody in celebration after he's netted his third, which is it's an unusual celebration, isn't it? I've never seen it repeated, but there you go. But yeah, Marco's hat-trick, I think he missed the penalty, hadn't he? And the penalty had rebounded out and he'd stuck the rebound back in to score his hat-trick and then lamped somebody.
Yeah.
Hauser comes back into the team with Gates, and Hauser scores a few goals. Gates actually plays a lot of games that year, or the rest of that year, but he only actually manages one more goal after the Portsmouth game, in which Tony Norman made his debut. Gates ends up the season with just 4 goals in the league in 37 games. So 27 starts, 10 sub-appearances, 4 goals. Gabbiadini's got 18 and 35, which is slightly better than 1 and 2. Hauser's got 2 goals in 6 games, or 6 starts. And Whitehurst had scored 3 and 17. So you've still got this thing for Denis Smith where Gabbiadini's his main man, and he's trying to find different people or different options to play alongside him. The season kind of fizzles out. We're relatively comfortable in mid-table. Gabbiadini's suspensions haven't helped at all. But Denis Smith's been really impressed with Thomas Hauser. Denis Smith's talking Thomas Hauser up as being a real force next season. He's having this few months to bed in, to learn the language, learn the club, learn the culture, living in a different country. And he's going to be a real force next season, is the quote. So it kind of shows whether Denis Smith's talking him up to give him a bit of confidence, trying to big him up, trying to get the fans on side with him. Who knows what the motivation is behind those comments? You can never just take them at face value, but he's really talking Hauser up. Maybe he wants to defend the 250 grand he's spent on this striker, which again was big money at the time. He's spent 450 grand on Tony Norman. You can see the value in that signing. He's spent more than half that again on Hauser, and it was a lot of money. It was still a lot of money at the time. So maybe he's part of it, pushing that as well.
On the money front, that's quite interesting, Martin, because Tony Norman, I think at the time, was our record signing. So we've gone from Division 3, scratting around, scraping together enough pennies to bring in the likes of John Kay and John McPhail. I wonder if it was the way in which Smith had got us promoted, but something has then happened for Bob Murray to suddenly say, maybe even Gabbiadini as well. He's seen how Gabbiadini was brought in for 80 grand, and he thought, I can trust this guy with the club's resources, because it does now look as if he's got a little bit of money to play with.
Well, it does. The Tony Norman deal was valued at 450 grand, wasn't it? So it included Whitehurst and Hesford.
True,
We don't know the value that was put onto their heads, but there would have still been some money gone alongside them to get that deal done. And he did spend 80 grand on Whitehurst, or 100 grand on Whitehurst earlier in that season. So the purse strings have been loosened a little bit. I think, there's that maybe the realization that we need to invest in the team. Denis Smith's earned the right because, at the same time, Gabbiadini's been talked about, linked with £1 million, £2 million moves to Liverpool, to Manchester United. And Bob Murray's thinking, well, if we can get that return from 80 grand in 18 months or 2 years, this is a man worth giving a bit of cash to see if you can get one or two more like that in. And, that's what they would have been hoping with Hauser at the boardroom level. You bring him in, does the job, unknown sign in England, worth $1 million or $2 million in a season or two's time. But that one didn't quite work out like that, but Gabbiadini certainly did. And Eric Gates' contract is another thing which we just will leave everybody with, because this runs into part 3. Because Eric Gates signed a 2-year contract in the summer. He's obviously going into the last year of his contract now, as Denis Smith's preparing for the second season in Division 2. And Eric Gates is telling everybody he's going to retire at the end of the season. This is it. So my last season in football, I'm hanging up my boots, because 35 was the age he could get his pension from the PFA. So that was it. Once he could get his pension, he says it in the press statements around the time, get your pension, I'm done. So that was Eric Gates' view going into pre-season. Thomas Hauser, Denis Smith was backing to be a real force, and of course Gabbiadini was there. A little bit of a disciplinary issue had emerged, but Denis Smith was hoping to calm that down and get the two of them firing again for the following season. So we will be back with part 3 next week. So Kelvin, thank you very much once again, mate.
Thank you.
And
thanks for having us.
That's always a pleasure, Kelvin. And thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you. Loved it. And Kelvin, just stay away from the bouncers in Sunderland pubs and nightclubs, please. I know you've been all fired up talking about Billy Whitehurst. Just, play it easy, please.
Yeah, come on. I'm more an Eric Gates than a Billy Whitehurst, me, when I'm out on the town.
I think he needs to stay away from Billy Whitehurst. Never mind the bouncers, but anyway.
Yeah. Hey, he doesn't frighten me. He doesn't frighten me.
Stay away from Sheffield, Kelvin. Right, we will be back next week with our part 3 of this Gates and Gabbiadini deep dive. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of How Are the Podcast. So until then, it's goodbye from us.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Athletic Brewing Company crafts award-winning non-alcoholic beers for those who want to be part of every round. With over 185 flavor awards, they're exceptional NA beers that fit your lifestyle and any social occasion. Summer's full of good times, and Athletic fits right in. Go to athleticbrewing.com to have brews delivered to your door, or find them at a bar, restaurant, or store near you. Near beer. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times.